I want to welcome you all to Prepping for Progress, adding new tools to your backpack or toolbox for the start of the school year. We are so excited to have you all here and welcome you to this session. We know that you are busy. We know that you are taking time out of your busy schedules to join us for these next couple of days to really learn and grow around this content, around developing and implementing high quality educational programming for students with disabilities. So again, we are so excited to have you here with us. We want to go ahead on the next slide and get to know the folks that are here as you're joining in. So we're going to do a quick poll. Mia's going to launch a poll just for you to share your role and what role you represent in the session. So are you a general educator, a special educator, a related service provider, district leader, school leader, state staff member, family member, or parent center staff? Are you a faculty member, a professional development provider, or do you have another role? Go ahead and tell us that in the chat as well. We also know you guys all wear probably multiple hats, just like all of us do. And so you might be a family member and a school or district leader. So feel free to select the one that best fits your role, but we know that you all have so many different roles. So yeah, go ahead and drop any notes in the chat as you're going through. I see a school psych, welcome, psychologists, folks from Montana and Arizona. We're so excited to have you all here. So I'll give you just another minute or so to add your response, and then we'll have Mia share the results. All right, Mia, I think we can go ahead and share those results. And what I'm seeing is we've got a lot of different roles. We've got a couple of general educators, our smallest percent, I think, and school leaders. We've got a lot of special educators, some related service providers, a good chunk of district leaders, some state staff, a couple of family members. We've got professional development providers, faculty, and other. We've got everything. So we're so excited to have so many different perspectives join the conversation today. And we hope you'll bring your different perspectives to this work. We also want to get to know where you are. So if you are familiar with Zoom, you can go ahead and in your toolbar up at View Options, use the annotate feature to check on the map where you come from. We know if you're from Rhode Island or Delaware, or some of the smaller DC, some of the smaller spots on the map, it might be hard to do. So feel free to put that in the chat as well. If you can't kind of find that annotate feature, or you can't find a spot to put yourself on the map. So great, look at that. We've got lots of folks from Arizona. We've got some folks from Washington and Montana and Texas and Minnesota and Michigan. We've got New York and Rhode Island, I see, in North Carolina, South Carolina, Florida. Wow, Ohio, lots of different folks here. We're so excited for you all to be here across all of the different states and across the country. All right. So look at that. We've got so many different folks. I'm going to go ahead and have Mia clear off our annotate. So if you haven't had a chance to use your annotate feature yet, go ahead and put where you're from in the chat if you feel comfortable with that. And we'll move on to the next slide. And introduce you a little bit to the Progress Center. So if you're not familiar with us at the Progress Center, I wanted to just give you a little bit of a sense of who we are as we get started for the event. So the Progress Center is here leading out this event across these next 2 days. Our goal is really to provide information, resources, tools, and technical assistance services to support local educators in developing and implementing high-quality educational programming that enable children with disabilities to make progress and meet challenging goals. Our center and our work is really grouped into 3 primary areas. Our first is really looking at kind of building our knowledge base around this work. So looking at what we can learn from research and policies and guidance and experiences from parents, educators, and other stakeholders in this work. And then using that information as we look into our next bucket of work that really is our partnership sites and our work with a small group of folks that are really in the field doing this work to help us learn alongside and pilot test some of this work that we're doing with them, learn from their experiences and shape that work as we go. And the final bucket of work is the work that I do. And that is really the universal technical assistance. And it's all the material that is freely available to all of you on the website, on the events like this and events like our webinar series and our online learning modules and other tools and products that we will share throughout the next couple days. So lots of different resources and tools available for you from the Progress Center. We also see ourselves kind of as a place to kind of pull together some tools and resources from a number of partner organizations at the Office of Special Education Programs through across the Technical Assistance and Dissemination Network. And so we see a space for sharing those tools and resources on our website, and we try and do that in our social media, our newsletters, and things like that as well. So if you're looking for information around a specific content area or focus that's outside of the scope of the work that we do, you can often find those tools and resources from our partners as well. All right, so on the next slide, I just wanted to briefly introduce the folks that are sharing in this session today. I've been talking already for a little while, so I'm Amy Peterson. As I mentioned before, I'm a senior researcher at American Institutes for Research and the lead for the Progress Center's Universal Technical Assistance. I'm pleased to be here with David Emenheiser, who is our project officer at the Office of Special Education Programs of the U.S. Department of Education. And he's going to do a welcome in just a minute to this session. And then we'll turn it over to Tessie Rose Bailey, who is our project director for the Progress Center. And we'll share a little bit about the keynote and some resources and tools to kind of kick us off and get us started. So with that, I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to David.
All right. Thank you, Amy. It is a great pleasure for me to be able to welcome everyone to this event, the Prepping for Progress. I want to start by just thanking everyone for being here. Not only today, not only to be attending this event, these sessions to get this professional development, but kind of in a broader and deeper way, thank you for what you do. These last 3 years have been quite a ride, and just piling a lot of stuff on you over the kind of each month, things are new, things are different, things are not the way that they used to. And you all have persevered and you have overcome. And so that is, I think, to start off, you need to pat yourselves on the back for really having hunkered down and overcome some really amazing things. And the amazing things that have been overcome is, or have been identified over these years, is the gaps, the holes, the things that maybe aren't or weren't working so well, especially with some of our students with disabilities. And so that is the kind of the exciting thing for today, right? Not to dwell in the negativity of the past, but to look forward and really being able to prepare and use what we've experienced in these last few years to launch a brand new school year in really exciting ways with some new tools, with some new ideas, with some new strategies of how to overcome those challenges that have been identified in your work. The great thing that I get to do as working in the Department of Ed is working with folks like the Progress Center, who are bringing research, evidence-based practices together in meaningful ways that are very practical, very practicable in your settings. So I think that if you truly engage with this over the next few days and think about and how it can be applied and how it can be used in your day-to-day, you're going to walk away with your backpack really full of some great strategies and some successful ways to approach this new year. Last but not least, I want to invite you to tell absolutely everybody you know about these events and about these trainings, because they are available to everybody, and we really need to get good information and good messages out. So with that, I'm going to turn it back over to Amy so you can get some of the good strategies.
Great. Thank you so much, David. And I think it's so true that we hope that you'll share this information, the tools, resources that we discussed across these next couple of days with your colleagues. If people are not able to attend and you think that this information will be helpful for them, please share these tools, resources, recordings with them so that they can access this content after the fact as well. And you guys are the best advocates for this work, for keeping this message going out to the field. So we really appreciate all of you in your roles in that. I wanted to just spend a little bit of time before I turn it over to Tessie for the keynote to just orient us to the event itself. I know there are a lot of moving pieces with different links and different registrations and the agenda across the 2 days. Being virtual is always, it's beneficial because as we saw before, we could see folks from all over the country being able to participate in this event. But we also know that there are logistical challenges to lots of moving pieces in a virtual environment. So wanted to just spend a little bit of time orienting us to the event itself, and then we'll get really into the meat of the content. Many of you probably already saw our virtual event kind of workbook or event book here that you can see on the screen. That information includes all of the resources that you need to know about the event itself. That includes things like the links to register to any of the sessions, who's presenting those different sessions, the descriptions for all those different sessions. And we'll have Mia go ahead and drop a link for that event program in the chat for you so you can access that directly. But our goals across these 2 days is really to provide some time to share information with all of you across different topic areas, including building better IEPs and preparing educators to support students with disabilities. We also want to hear from you and hear your experiences and have you share those experiences with others. So we'll have some networking opportunities, and then we'll have some concurrent sessions and topics that allow you to kind of dig deeper into different areas that you might be interested in, whether that's focusing on creating an experience of belonging for all students, including students with disabilities in your school, how to better engage and work with parents and families as partners in this work to support students with disabilities, really thinking about the implementation and implementation fidelity and the key considerations we need to put into place there as well. And then finally, as we think about some of the things that we can learn from our due process hearings and the law and considerations there. So lots of different topics across these next 2 days. In that program that Mia just shared in the link or in the chat for you, you'll see the overview of this event schedule. We are currently in the general session, keynote session on day 1. So we're in that 11 to 12:20 p.m. timeframe. If you're on the East Coast, all these times are on the East Coast. So if I know we've got folks from all over the place, you got to do some translation there with time zones. But after this, we'll have a good chunk of a break. If you're on the East Coast, that might be a good time to get lunch. If you're on the West Coast, maybe some breakfast or a snack or something like that. So at 1 o'clock, we'll come back together for our first kind of other sessions, broken out sessions for the day. And those are our strand sessions. So we'll have 2 kind of parts of the strand with a break in the middle. So our strand will really go from 1 p.m. to 3:20 p.m. But you'll see in each of those 2 strand opportunities, there is a break in the middle. So it's not a full 2 hours and 20 minutes of content thrown at you. You will have that 20-minute break in the middle there. We'll have a short break. And then if you're interested in the optional topical discussions where that provides that time for networking, we'll convene together again at 3:30 p.m. Eastern for a 30-minute conversation around different topics of interest and opportunities for you to engage with your peers. Tomorrow, we'll kick off with that same optional networking and discussion time, and then we'll break into our general session where we'll have a panel discussion with stakeholders that represent multiple roles in this work. So we'll hear from a young adult with a disability, a special educator, family members, local special ed district leaders, as well as an assistant technology specialist and lead. So we'll have some opportunity to hear different voices then in that panel conversation tomorrow. That's kind of our general session tomorrow. You'll see it starts at 11 a.m. again, same time. And then after that, again, we'll have a short break, and then we'll have 2 rounds of concurrent sessions. So those will be the same session from 12:40 to 1:40 and from 2 to 3. Same topics offered, so you'll be able to choose 2 of 4 different concurrent sessions. And then we'll wrap it up with a closing session around 3:20 tomorrow, just sharing some reflections and sharing some resources and tools, making sure that you have all of the materials and tools in your backpack to start the school year. So that's kind of our overview of those 2 different days. And I just want to share that a reminder in your all the information you received, you know that you have to independently register for each of those sessions that you're interested in attending. Because these are all those Zoom meeting links, you have to make sure that you register for all the different sessions. So if you're in this session and you haven't had a chance to register for another session that you're really interested in attending, don't worry, there's still time to do that. If you go to that program where Mia has shared in the chat, you can find those QR codes, you can find those links to all of the other sessions that you might be interested in attending. You can still register. So take a chance to do that during the break as we go forward. I just wanted to spend a little bit of time orienting you to the different kind of session opportunities as well. I mentioned before about the strands today. So there's 2 different strand sessions. Those are those longer sessions this afternoon. The first is making connections, ensuring the parts of the IEP work together to promote progress. And that's really a great opportunity for folks that represent membership on the IEP team, or those really working and focusing on developing high quality IEPs and how do we think about building better IEPs and the consistency and the coherence of our IEPs. That's the focus of that first strand. And the second strand is really for leaders and professional development providers and faculty members who are really focused on preparing in-service and pre-service educators to promote progress. How can you structure some of those supports and learning opportunities for students or for educators in order to help benefit students with disabilities? So those are our 2 strand opportunities today. Many of you probably have already registered for the one that you're interested in. And as I mentioned before, on day 2, we'll have concurrent sessions. So these are the 4 topics for the concurrent sessions. One is really focused on promoting belonging for all students. The second on engaging parents on the path to progress or in collaboration with parents and families. The next, as I mentioned before, is really focused on assessing our fidelity of implementation. Did we really do what we said we would? If we outlined developed a high quality IEP, but we don't put it into place, what do we need to think about in order to improve our implementation? And the last is providing free appropriate public education or FAPE, lessons from the due process hearing front. We will have an opportunity to attend 2 of those sessions. So if you're really interested in both belonging and parent and family engagement, you can sign up for each of those sessions at the 2 different time periods. But say you're really interested in all of those topics. I know that there's not an opportunity to attend live all of those different sessions, but as I mentioned before, we'll be recording all of the content for these different sessions across these couple days. So you can always go back and listen to the recording after the fact if you're not able to attend a session live. So with that, I just want to share where on the website you can find all of the recording and event materials. I think Mia's going to drop the link for that into the chat for you as well, so you can access that. But if you go to the Progress Center website, which is www.promotingprogress.org, you will find at the top, there's a toolbar that says development, implementation, news and events, resources and tools, training, about, and contact. Under the news and events tab, there's a drop down and you'll see Prepping for Progress 2022. And if you click on that, you'll get this page as well. So if you can't find that archived recording link after the fact, you can go to the homepage, look at news and events, and you'll be able to find it directly there. On that page, you'll see these accordions of text for each of the sessions that are available across the next couple of days. And there you'll also see, if you expand one of those accordions, where you can find both the slides or handouts or any key links that are shared during the event. We know we'll be sharing lots of different tools, resources, and links with you, and sometimes it's hard to follow them all in the Zoom chat. So we wanted to provide a place, a one-stop shop for all of that material for you. And then after the event is over and we've got the recordings all put together and cleaned up, take off any of the front end stuff and all of that, we'll go ahead and post those recordings for you in the same section here under session materials. You'll be able to find the links to those that are hosted on our YouTube channel. You can also follow us on YouTube and find those recordings there as well. So if you have any problems finding any of that content, any of those materials, or any questions or challenges with any of the technology across these next 2 days, we know that there are a lot of moving pieces. We know that technology can be a challenge. We wanted to make sure that you have a one-stop shop person to go to as well. And so Mia, who's doing all of our logistics for this session, is dropping the chat, all the information in the chat for you, is also available throughout the event for any technical questions you have with technology, with accessing sessions, with accessing materials, with finding links or any of that. So Mia's website, her email address is up here on the screen. You can see that there. She'll drop that in the chat for you as well so that you can easily take that down. But if you have any challenges throughout the next couple of days, she will do her best to respond to you as quickly as possible. I'm going to say her email out loud just in case anyone needs it. It is mmamone@air.org. And again, if you have any questions, concerns, challenges, don't hesitate to reach out. Mia will do her best to respond throughout the next couple of days to that. If you have any questions about anything after the event, feel free to reach out to Mia or also to the Progress Center at progresscenter@air.org. And our email address is on the last slide of this session as well. And we'll show that and put that up for you. Last, before I turn it over to Tessie, I wanted to just share and encourage you, if you're not doing so already, to connect with us, both on Facebook and Twitter at K12 Progress. You can also sign up for our newsletter and email blasts that we send out every once in a while. We want to make sure that as new tools and resources come out, that we can share those with you. And then we also want to keep the conversation over this next couple of days alive. So you'll see a hashtag there, promoting progress 2022. Please use that, tag us in any post that you have, share that information, as David said, with your friends, with your colleagues, with others, with lessons learned that you hear across these next couple of days, with tools and resources that you find useful and you think others might find useful, with tips from other folks that are here at the event. So please don't hesitate to reach out to us, follow us on Facebook and Twitter. Connect with us however you might like to, social media wise, and we're excited to have you here. So with that, I think that's most of the logistics out of the way. I'm sure there are still some questions, and if you have any, feel free to put them in the chat or send those out to us. Julie, we do have a podcast that we have done a couple sessions, podcast recordings. We will continue to see how we can best keep that going, but there are different links available there on the website. I can send or drop a chat in the chat, a link for that material as well. So I'm going to turn it over at this point to Tessie to share the keynote presentation, Path to Progress. What does it take to develop and implement high quality educational programming for students with disabilities?
All right, thanks, Amy. And if you all can find your reactions on your toolbar, you'll see the little hands clapping. I'd like to give a round of applause for Amy. This event was actually supposed to be in person. COVID started at the launch of our center, and we've done a lot of pivoting to make sure that we can get the right information out to the right people at the right time. And so trying to do this event in a virtual way has been really exciting and really challenging. We've learned a lot about how to get information out in this virtual world. So thank you very much, Amy, and thanks, Mia, for being the go-to person for our technology. I'd also really like to thank David, because a lot of what you're going to see today, particularly this path right here, came from our conversations with OSEP, particularly David, around how do we talk about this? How do we really move forward? And what you'll hear throughout both days is this positive approach that we really have to be clear about our path. We have to make sure that it's feasible, it's fun, right? And it's using those resources and practices that we know that really help students move forward. And so I'm really excited to be here today. As Amy mentioned, I do serve in the director role. And I'm I'm excited to be here in that role, but I also want to share that I'm here as a parent as well. I have 2 kids with disabilities who I adopted from the social service system. And so, I've one with really severe behavioral and mental health disabilities and one with a really severe learning disability. And to me, this work is so critical to how we really think about the school experience for kids, right? Not just a particular type of kids or a particular type of setting, that really any kid with a disability served in any setting across the United States. And so I'm excited to share that. I also am a teacher and a previous K-12 teacher working with kids with disabilities. So I bring all of that passion and that excitement to this world, and seeing it all come together for a single path to progress is super exciting for me. And so I'm going to focus really on how do we ensure that every student is on the right path to progress. And you'll notice that we don't really define progress in our work because it is, in a sense, dependent upon your local context, your students. But in general, we have some accepted ways of looking at progress for students. If you look at the regs, we talk around academic achievement as well as functional performance. And so as I'm moving through, you may see some references to the academic achievement part, and that's probably because it gets out more to the public. But our assumption is this idea of progress is this intertwining of students' academic success and functional performance that really helps them be a successful student, right? That ultimately graduates and as a successful adult. So that's really what we're looking at. I do want to just share a current reality, and it's just something where we are. It's not meant to justify where we're going, but it is this reality about where students with disabilities are sitting within our academic achievement. Now, every year, states submit data to the federal government, and that is in a report that you can actually read that gives you sort of the pulse of overall education. And we've seen a lot of growth in some areas, but one of the areas we really haven't seen the most growth, or what we would expect, is around academic achievement. And so if we look at how students with disabilities are currently performing, we do see this persistent lower academic achievement than their peers without disabilities. And I've just shared some 8th grade data, but we do see this across these major points of performance. And this is really concerning because our assumption around providing special education, or IDEA, was to ensure that every student with a disability had the same opportunities for success as their peers without disabilities. In other words, they were not experiencing or benefiting from the core programming alone the same as their peers, and as a result needed special education, right? And so our assumption of adding on that special education was meant to provide that opportunity that would be similar to their peers. So we would assume that most kids with disabilities would be performing at or above target, right? It doesn't mean they don't need special education if they're performing, but what it means is that they need that special education to perform at similar rates. And part of this misunderstanding around the role of special ed is that our expectations have maybe not been consistent across the country, right? Is that you'll sometimes hear, oh, well, he's in special education and that's why he's not performing, or he's in special education or has a disability and that's why he acts like that. We have to move away from that as we start to build this path for progress for students. And part of that is based on our beliefs, right? If our beliefs around our role in special education, our role as service providers or interventionists is not to maintain, right, or help kids, just be there. Really what we're trying to do is say we hold similar high expectations for all of our students, But the way that kids meet those expectations is really going to be unique to their needs, right? And we have this really great act called IDEA that allows us to provide these high quality services and, specially designed instruction and related services and our supplementary aids and our program modifications to ensure that students can achieve those high expectations if they have needs based on their disability. Now, tomorrow we have a panel, as Amy mentioned, that has educators, parents, but we also have this really great advocate, Billy Pickens, who you'll hear here in a second, who shares the importance of us setting these high expectations, that our beliefs, right, really dictate the opportunities that students have. And if you think back to your education, like what made the difference? It probably wasn't that intervention program or the curriculum that your teacher used. It always comes back to that educator who believed in you, who supported you, and pushed you to meet those expectations. And that's what Billy's going to share with us. So let me know if you can't hear it, but hopefully it's working. Did not work.
In this Stories from the Classroom video, Billy Pickens tells us how his teacher's high expectations for him may not have been welcome in high school, but that as an adult who is deaf-blind, he now appreciates how important it was for his future.
On the first couple of days of school, and I was young at the time, so I didn't recognize this, but teachers weren't really giving me the same work. In fact, in the beginning, I was placed in a special ed class, even though I had been mainstream throughout elementary school. And so their automatic assumption was that I needed to be in a special ed class. But they realized, oh, he kind of surpassed the class and what they were doing. So they put me back in mainstream. And then when I got mainstream, some of the teachers were very kind of hesitant about how to teach me. And so I definitely felt like at the time I was kind of not thinking much of it because they weren't really giving me work, and I guess I was fine with that because I was 12 and I didn't want work. But I think that later on I realized that there was a lot of under expectation, a lot of just wanting to pass me up and not really treat me the same way as my sighted peers.
One English teacher made a lasting difference for Billy's future.
He called a meeting and he was like, your writing is really good. And he was like, why are you in standard? You should be in honors with this kind of writing. And I said, well, I don't want to do the homework. And he was like, well, I can help that. You can stay in standard, but I'm going to give you honors level work. And so he kept me in standard. I thought he was joking, but then all of a sudden points get taken off or commas here. And it got to the point where me, and my mom were all kind of butting heads about it because I need the class to graduate. And he was being extremely hard on me. And at the time, I didn't really like it because, like I said, I didn't want to do the work. And later on, he told my mom, he was like, I know we can do it. So I really gave it my all eventually, and I did pass the class and did well.
So what does Billy recommend for educators to promote progress for students with disabilities?
Leave your biases at the door and just walk in and see people as individuals. I know that sometimes it can be hard, and I understand that we're all kind of judgmental in some way at times. We all kind of look at people or have a first impression of people. But I think as a teacher, do your best to try to realize that anyone who walks in your classroom likely wants an education. They may not realize it at that point because they may be young and just kids, but I think everybody genuinely wants to learn something. And so I think if you see that and see beyond what disability they have or what race they are or whatever it might be, I think that you can realize that at the end of the day, everybody wants to learn and everybody can learn.
Billy graduated from the University of North Carolina at Charlotte in 2020. He now works for the Exceptional Children's Assistance Center, leading the youth advisory team and youth newsletter, while developing his very own podcast series.
So I know somebody asked about a podcast, but that would be a really great one to follow. And I think Billy's message really resonates with me, because I think about my own son, who I'll share here in a little bit, is it really had to be that one teacher. And it wasn't until he was in the 6th grade or 7th grade that one teacher really helped him believe that he could do it, because that teacher believed he could do it. Now, why this matters is that if we think about the current reality of our educational system, almost 70% of kids with disabilities spend the majority of their time accessing and participating in general education curriculum. So I know there's a lot of special education teachers here, and I think sometimes we might feel frustrated that we're not getting this, collaborative effort, but it really is around us coming together, right? That at least one teacher has to hold those expectations and to really be able to collaborate and communicate with that general ed teacher. When we look at the data, we know that almost all students with disabilities spend at least some portion of their day in the general education. And I think what this really resonates for us, what resonates for me and clarifies for us, is that students are all general education students, even though we might be thinking within our school what our role is. And I remember saying things like, oh, he's one of my special education students, or he's a special ed kid. Those things are where we need to think differently about our language, because what they promote is that it's my role as an individual to be able to support that student. And in reality, if we think about all of our students as general education students first, then we start to think more about a team really helping the student. And then if we sort of change our narrative that this is a general education student who also requires special education aids and services in order to get the biggest bang for their buck, right, out of general education, then we start to see this special education more as a positive benefit, right? It's the supplement to give this whole general education experience that allows students with disabilities their maximum benefit, right? To really build this path to progress. And if you've ever seen me chat before, I love sharing this quote. And it's because as a former special education teacher and a former general education teacher, you start to recognize that there's really no way that a single teacher has all the time and the knowledge and the skills to meet the needs of every kid in their class, not just a particular group of kids, but all of their kids, right? That we're sort of all in this together. And I want to also say that what's evolved for me over time is that there's also no single system. It's not general education's fault. It's not the state's fault or special ed, right? Like, it's not an entity's responsibility. It's that our systems are designed to really leverage all of these systems simultaneously so that we start to build what we will refer to as an ecosystem that allows teachers to be collectively effective, right? So sometimes we feel like we're in this isolation and we're working in a single system, and we recognize, right, that it's not working. We've got to step back and start to say, how do we build this sustainable ecosystem? And I think COVID really clarified for us this importance of sustainability, because if you're like me, you may have a couple more gray hairs this year because it just seemed like we were on overdrive all the time. So what we're trying to do is leverage all of the parts of the system to build something that's sustainable, that allows our teachers, the leaders, the educators, the service providers in that school to be able to develop and implement high quality educational programming for all students, right? Including students with disabilities. And what we're seeing is this need for a collective efficacy, right? That we have to be collectively effective, not just one teacher who's effective or one grade that's effective. But in order for us to really maximize the benefits of schooling, we need to have this collective effect. Now, that's not a lot of mumbo jumbo. There's actually a lot of research that is supporting this. And I want to share that this underlying piece of collective teacher efficacy is this collective belief, right? That we have this ability to positively impact students. And it goes back to kind of what Billy was saying in the video, is that sometimes our teachers and our leaders and our service providers don't feel like they can do it, right? They don't believe they have the knowledge or the skills or the resources or the money. And because of that, we often don't see the progress. But ultimately, we all can make a difference. I think about my husband, who's like a classic non-educator, who's, you know, he was in the, he's an engineer, and under COVID, he believed that only I could do the teaching because I had the degree. But to be honest, he also had the skills and knowledge. He knew the student he was working with. He knew the content area, like he knew how to do multiplication facts, right? And once he started to believe that he could do it, he then started to see that impact. And he was excited, not just my son who was excited, but he was excited. And that excitement is what drives us to education, right? It's our belief that we can make a difference. And that evidence, right? That's like, yeah, I impacted that student. I can see that growth occurring, right? That's the excitement. And if you're like me, you're probably getting tingly and you're like, oh my heck, I can't wait to start the school year. But while that seems like, you know, just this belief and seeing the impact, we know that that makes the difference, right? And if you're familiar with Hattie's work on effect sizes, we generally say like a 0.4 is equivalent to a year's growth. This collective belief within our school, within our system, that we can do it has a effect size of 1.57, right? That's huge. We didn't have to purchase anything for that. We just have to come together and really have this strong collective belief that we can do it, implement what we think is going to work, and then start to look at that data and make those changes. And know that maybe sometimes we don't pick the right thing. That's okay, right? But if we continue to believe we can do it, we'll try the next thing. And that really is at the heart of specially designed instruction, right? That comes with special education. And a way to really facilitate this is we're seeing these, we got to start asking the right questions. When we think about the wrong questions, there are things like, what's wrong with that kid? What's wrong with that teacher? What's wrong with those parents? That gets us to focus on the wrong part, and we try to fix the wrong part. But it doesn't necessarily mean fixing that wrong part is the right thing to do, because we don't know where we're going. And that's where the path has to start. And the path and this collective efficacy starts with the right questions. And the first one is here, and I'm going to give you a chance in the chat box to share. But think about what it is you want for your students that you work with. When you move into this next year, what is it that you want? What is it that you want for your families? This question and how we respond to it is really what determines whether we have high expectations for kids and whether we're thinking about the big picture. Now, as you're writing, I'll just share a brief little story, is that when I was a parent, I was sitting, it was second grade, and I was sitting with my oldest, who, as I mentioned, has very severe behavioral and mental health concerns. I mean, he was in a mental facility for a period of time due to PTSD and trauma. And I think about when we were sitting at the meeting, and the facilitator said to the teacher, what do you want for the student? And she said, I just want him to not disrupt class, right? I want him to sit in his chair, and I want him, you know, to do his work. And I thought that was interesting. And then she turned to me and she said, well, what do you want? And I said, I want my kid to be able to be a successful adult. I want him to have a job. I want him to have friends. I want people to care about him. And that, sorry, I'm getting a little teary-eyed. But that is that sort of focus on how we have to look at our work. If we don't clarify what we want, we start to look at the things we want to change that are interfering with the progress for students. And instead, we've got to think about this big picture. So I see that want my students to make a positive impact. Oh my heck, I think about that all the time. They understand their strengths and their needs and be able to advocate. We want kids to feel good about themselves. We want them to feel happy, excited. Part of that is the instructional piece, right? Their academic success. We want them to graduate. But really, if we think about what we want for kids, it's this experience, right, that is helping us be better, helping us contribute to being better. Thank you all for sharing these. And I hope that as you move into your IEP meetings, and maybe you're doing the next session, is think about every IEP meeting. Well, probably you need to start well before the IEP meeting is, what do you want, right? What's the big picture? We're probably, I mean, I will say it took my kid about 6 years before he was able to sort of stabilize where his skill set is, but we were all on the same path, right? We were all thinking big picture about where we were going. I can see that feeling safe and enough to try. Oh my heck, that is a big deal. I want kids to feel safe, right? To be able to fail and learn about themselves and experience, right? Great, we'll keep them coming. So once we have that sort of what we want for our kids, then we can start to say, what is the current reality, right? So I think about my son in the 2nd grade, and I understood at that point in time, he lacked a lot of the basic knowledge and skills necessary. Luckily, he still had time, right? Because he's not going to graduate for about, 10 more grades. But that current reality is where we start to think about the present levels, right? Is where is this student at? And that present level says, this is where we currently are. This is where we want to be. What does this student need and the family need in order to help this student move there? And that 2nd grade teacher, right, is just part of this collective benefit, right? They're not doing everything, but they're part of that big picture. And then when we think about the IEP itself, right, all the stuff that goes in it, the services, where we're at, that really comes later. Because if we've clarified the current reality, where we want kids to be, and what are their needs now, right, moving forward, then we can think about how we maximize it. If we start with the last question first, we get really hung up on what do we do, right? What do we purchase? What's there? And as a person who's worked in the field for almost 30 years, that's often the question I get. And I say it's the wrong question, right? It's not what program you're going to use. It's that, do you know your student enough? Do you know where they're going to even think about what's necessary to help the students succeed? So as Amy mentioned at the beginning a little bit, the center was really around this idea of, how do we promote appropriate progress in response to the Andrew F. decision. And the Andrew F. decision, it's not that we've not done this, right? It's not like IDEA was doing it wrong before and now it's different, but it really clarified and put a spotlight on what we need to be thinking about, right? And we have to think about the programming, the high quality programming we provide. Is it reasonably calculated, right, to help that student move from their current reality to where our vision is for their success, right? So we don't define what progress is in IDEA. That's really part of the team, and that based on your high expectations. But we think about, what does this kid need given their current reality in light of their circumstances, right? I mean, I could have the same expectation for both of my students, both of my kids in the 2nd grade, but their current realities, their circumstances were completely different, right? So the program we provide is going to be different. So the way that the center is functioning right now is trying to simplify, as David mentioned, what is it that we want to focus on? How do we make this sustainable? How do we make this feasible? And part of it is we need to be really good about our development, right? We know there's a lot of research, there's a lot of federal investment. research. I know there's a lot of faculty members on here. We know what works, but how do we get that into practice so that we're able to see the gains? Because the design doesn't have the effect. It's the implementation piece, right, that really results in the benefit. So the IEP is part of that development, but the implementation, as Amy mentioned, right, is what moves us to the progress that we expect to see. Now you'll see here we do use the multiplication sign because you can't just have one without the other, right? We have to have good design development and we've got to have good implementation for that. And that's something that's actually outlined in the law itself. And I want to, just sort of reinforce this idea of free, appropriate public education. As Amy mentioned, you'll see it highlighted in all of our sessions. That's ultimately the goal, right, of IDEA, is to provide that. And it's good for us to be clear about what it means. And so if you think about the way we've previously functioned, we've really had a lot of focus on this procedural piece, right? Like what goes in the IEP? How do we write it? What forms do we use? What boxes do we check? That part is important because the design of it was not willy-nilly. Somebody, based on our research and our learning over the last 45 plus years, is we know that there are critical features. And in fact, there are 7 of them that are necessary for us to develop an IEP that, if implemented, is going to produce growth. And that's really what the substantive piece that was clarified by Andrew is the so what, right? If we take this really procedurally well-designed IEP, does it matter for the kid, right? Like, do we see this internal consistency, which Dr. Chrissy Brown and Amy Peterson and myself will be talking about in the IEP session? Are we designing it in a way that allows us to make claims that this is going to help this student meet the needs outlined in their plan? Something else that's emerging, and you'll hear some of this as well in the due process law session tomorrow, is this idea of implementation. And we don't really see, we assume that it's there, right? But we don't see an effect from an IEP. It's a piece of paper. It sits on the desk, right? The effect is this last part. Now, to help you sort of get a sense about what this looks like, and this is something we've learned, as Amy mentioned, we have our intensive sites, and then we have our universal TA, and we do some iterative cycles of learning of how do we communicate this message. And one of them, with the help of our project officer, is a bike. Now, you can just give me a show of hands. How many of you have a bike? How many of you know what a bike is? And I would assume that most people in our country know what a bike is, right? And you know that there are critical pieces to a bike. Every bike has wheels, it has some sort of framing structure, it has handlebars. There are some things that don't have brakes or do have brakes, but we know that there are critical parts to a bike. You can think about the IEP in the same way, right? That an IEP has these individual parts that we design, right? And I think about an IEP, there are 7 parts, in case you're wondering, or maybe you get quizzed about it at some point, but there are 7 critical parts to an IEP, right? It has present levels of academic achievement and functional performance. It's got goals, it's got a monitoring plan, a statement, right? So there are pieces. And we have previously focused on the getting each of those pieces really well. So like if you're a biker, maybe you're really into biking, you want a super fancy seat, right? But most of us don't really think about a bike in its individual parts, right? I don't. I just buy a bike and it comes with all of the parts. And that's really where we think about the substantive piece. We can have really fancy parts, but if those parts don't fit together, they don't create a vehicle, right? And if you think about the IEP as this vehicle for progress, it needs to be able, all those parts, right, to be able to work together. So you've got your assessment that's driving the baseline and your present levels that aligns to your, SDI and the monitoring plan. Your SDI is helping the student progress on their goals, and your monitoring plan is determining that, right? So if you think about the IEP as this bike or this vehicle, it allows the student to move forward, right? That it's designed as a vehicle. Now, I'll talk about this in a second, but if you're like me, you might have a bike in your garage that has a lot of dust on it and maybe doesn't get used. So it's not just the vehicle itself, right, that really helps us promote progress or move forward, but it is a critical piece of it. And we know that, bikes, just like IEPs, are not the same. And this is where we start to refine different parts of it to make it work for me. COVID was really hard on me, so I need a little bit bigger seat, right? Or I got really short legs, so I need smaller wheels. But ultimately, the parts, excuse me, are the same. So we're starting to individualize those parts based on that student's current reality. So what great is an IEP if it doesn't get implemented? And that's why I was mentioning that part about it. And what we're finding in the case law is that there really are two ways of thinking about that implementation. One is the Fidelity, which, excuse me, Dr. Stephen Prater will talk about next tomorrow. And I can't remember who else is on that session, but really, what do we need to do to put that in place? A big acronym that we're seeing is it fair, right? Is it feasible? Is it acceptable to the team? Is it likely to create that impact? And is it relevant for the student? So that fidelity is the extent to which we put in those practices. The other thing, and this may be more of a concern for folks moving into this year, is our capacity to implement, right? And that's, do our staff have the knowledge and skills to be able to implement that IEP? So when we think about the development, it's not that we're developing IEPs based on our context, but we have to be developing IEPs that can be implemented to get students to that growth, right? Ultimately, the growth, the outcome is what we're looking for. So we've kind of illustrated this into this path to progress, right? That we have our IEP and it really is our vehicle. But unless we set that IEP up, like Billy mentioned, in an environment in which it's going to allow the student to make progress, we're not going to see those gains, right? And our evidence over time has really clarified a couple of key elements that are what we need to be focusing on to develop that sustainable ecosystem. That first one, which is probably not surprising, is educator support. Are we providing coaching, staff time for, teachers to do their professional development, time for them to be able to teach with the right resources? This is really around the extent to which we're meeting educators' needs so that they can be their best self, their collective benefit, right, from that teaching experience. Something tomorrow we'll talk about, and Ties will be here this afternoon if you want to start the conversation today, is this idea of belonging. There's been a lot of work around inclusion, but what we've seen is that there's been more of a focus on physical inclusion, or making sure kids are getting just access to the curriculum. And if you read back of what people want, they want more than that, right? We want our kids to feel like they're part of the school community. They're part of the experience of school. And that's really where belonging is, taking it a step further. And we've identified 10 dimensions that help folks promote belonging within your school. Effective instruction, probably not surprising. Something else we've done with the help of some researchers across the country is identify those evidence-based, high-leverage practices, right, that are necessary for the design and delivery of specially designed instruction. As we mentioned, if we don't actually provide that instruction, we don't see the benefits. Family engagement, which we'll also be talking about tomorrow, is really a critical piece. And as a parent myself, I think about the burden that schools often feel to do everything. In reality, it is a collective effort. I'm working with the school. We're creating this overall opportunity to ensure that my kids can succeed given their current reality. And finally, that last, what is ongoing teaming, and it also includes the data components of it, is that we have time to really be able to specially design, right? A single teacher cannot do that. I'll just say that right now. It is a collective effort. It's our deeper understanding of the student, and it's our understanding, leveraging our collective expertise to design something that this student needs at this time. So that teaming is a really critical piece. And we have some resources, not just on our website, but also on the National Center on Intensive Intervention around facilitating effective teaming. So I'll close my session. I can't really not talk about NTSS, but I will say that, and that's because we know that most schools are implementing some sort of tiered system of support. And this is a great way, that sustainable ecosystem that we're trying to develop for students. Your MTSS system is a great way to leverage those supports, right? And if we think about the tiers that exist, kids with disabilities also benefit from tiers of support, right? Not all kids with disabilities need intensive instruction. You know, some kids would benefit from supplementary aids and services or co-teaching at the tier 1 level, right? So we think about this as an infrastructure that we can leverage to really promote a sustainable ecosystem for students. And just clarifying this idea that all kids, right, are benefiting. All kids are getting what they need within our school. And that system that we have in place allows us to do that as kids' needs change. And just an example, I will say that my oldest son probably needed very intensive supports his first 3 years of school. It's just kind of the reality. But as he was able to self-advocate and gain the skills, he actually is doing very well in a tier 1 setting with very limited supports. And in fact, like Billy, he's a really prolific writer, and it became part of his way to deal with his emotions. And so we think about this system, and special ed is not one opportunity, but really leveraging the overall school system to provide kids what they need when they need it. So before I close up and we open it up for some questions and get you ready for your next one, I just want to bring you back to these questions because they've really helped clarify for me and the teams that I work with where we go. It's going to be a bit of a challenging year, I suspect, and we have to keep our focus on what's most important. And that's that first question: what do we want for our students and our families? We have to start our conversations, right? Before we even start filling our toolboxes, what is it that we want? What will be successful this year, right? If I was to say I was a great teacher, what would it look like? Once we've clarified that, it allows us to start developing our collective belief that we can move our students to that's where we want them to be. We have to be honest about our current reality. We cannot use it as an excuse or a rationale for why kids can't do something. It just is the reality that we're working with. And sometimes maybe we don't know how to do it, but gosh, look at all the people on this call today. You've got the center, you've got the U.S. Department of Ed. We're literally all in this together. So we can leverage each other to really figure out how do we do something for this kid in this circumstance at this time, right? And then we can start to clarify those needs and what we're going to do for our kids moving forward. And I will say something that we've learned, and you'll hear this in the next session around IEPs, and you'll see it within our resources, is that present level statement or present levels of academic achievement and functional performance is where those first two bullets should be. So if a student moves to another school or moves to another teacher, we still know what we want for the student. We know what that current reality is, because with that information, a teacher can then really understand the needs and then be able to design the system to help the student address those needs. Now, I know I've talked a lot, and I will say in the other sessions, there are more engagement but we really just want to start off with saying, we can do this, right? Collectively, we're all in this together. Somebody knows, and we just have to start to leverage those resources, whether they're free federal resources, the great resources from your state or your district, or your colleagues or the family, and even the student, I think, can help us understand where we need to go. So I wasn't able to watch the chat box a lot, but and I know I only have about 2 minutes, but if you have questions, you can put those in the chat box. I know that I also have a session in the networking time around the IEP or the SDI. So if you want to engage in conversations with that, feel free to chime in. I will say I won't tell you the answer, because this is really us leveraging our expertise. You know your student, you're likely to be the best expert for that kid. So thanks, Julie. All right, Amy.
Yeah, any questions for Tessie before we turn it over to just some final reminders about kind of where you can find some of the materials, and then we'll send you on your way for a short break.
Yeah, and I will say, I just noticed that Claire mentioned, around getting the PDF for the slideshow. We will, as a federally funded center, we will have these things available so that you can share the same message, right? And I think that's really where, if we're all on the same page and we're moving in the same path, it makes it a lot easier that as we move into this next school year with this different circumstances, right, that are going to be there. So.
Hi, Tessie, this is Val, and I joined a little late, but what parts I did take on, they've been wonderful. I'm texting out already saying, folks, I'll get copies of this presentation. When I keyed on, it said recording in process. So will the recordings be there as well, along with the PowerPoint PDF?
Oh, Tessie,
everything, yeah, everything that you will hear and see over the next 2 days, you will have access to. And so Amy will confirm before we move forward, but the recordings, the 508 PowerPoint presentations, and the transcripts will all be available, as well as every resource that we reference in our sessions.
Well, wonderful. Thank you.
Good.
Yeah, so Tessie, if you move over to the next slide, I think.
Okay, I see Becky just put a question. I want to make sure I respond to it. Is what strategies that have I found helpful for bringing student voice to the IEP? If you are interested, please attend the belonging session. We actually have video of helping students be part of that process. And there's some great resources, but I think the strategies that are in the belonging handouts and work are really where we've allowed students to be a voice, not just like as a sidebar. Because I mean, I've been in the field for a long time, and we used to do, I will say, student-led IEPs is great, but there needs to be some front work, and that front work is in that belonging session, Becky. All right, well, I want to thank you all, and I look forward to continuing the conversations, and I'm going to pass it over to Amy to get us started.
Yeah, so I just wanted to highlight a couple don't forgets about the agenda for the rest of the day. So for you all, we'll have a break after this. We'll have about a 40-minute break, and then at 1 o'clock Eastern, or whatever time zone you might be doing the translation there, we'll start the strand session. So we've got those 2 sessions I mentioned before, one around making connections that Tessie has talked about, and the other really around expanding your toolbox for preparing educators. So if you're really in the role of kind of structuring professional learning and things like that, that might be a great session for you to attend. If you haven't had a chance to register for those sessions already, you can still do that. And we'll drop again the link to the event program, so you can find the QR code and the links directly there for you to jump right into. And then at the end of the day, we'll have those optional networking discussion times. Again, 30 minutes of time for you to talk with other folks that are here. We've got lots of good conversation that's been happening in the chat so far. We want to keep those going in those networking discussion times. So that's what our day for the rest of the day looks like. And on the next slide is just a reminder on where you can find the materials for the session. Oh, can you go one more, Tessie, and then we can go back to that. Where you can find the event materials. So this is, Claire, where you would find the PowerPoint presentations and Valerie and others. So if you expand any of those kind of sections on the web page itself, you'll find currently the PowerPoint presentation for the session, any handouts that will be used in the session, and then related links to any materials that are part of the session, or reference resources and tools that were shared during the session. After the event is over and we have a chance to get those recordings together, those along with the transcripts and other materials will be included in that section as well. So you'll be able to find those directly on this one page, and that will go in the chat for you as well. And I mentioned before, if you weren't here at that point, if you go to the promotingprogress.org, the landing page for our website, you'll see that there's a news and events tab at the top. Under that tab, you'll see a drop down for this event, 2022 Prepping for Progress, and you'll find that right there. So you'll be able to access all those materials. If you have any questions or concerns accessing that, don't hesitate to reach out. Remember to connect with us on Facebook, on Twitter, share with others, and also sign up for the newsletter, which you can find at the bottom of the homepage or at this link here on the news and events section. So you can keep in touch with us throughout the event and after the event to access any tools and resources. I wanted to mention that in the Progress Center has a self-paced learning module that really talks about the path to progress that Tessie shared during the keynote. So if you were intrigued by that bike analogy and you really wanted to share that with others, but you weren't sure you felt comfortable taking the presentation and sharing that with others, there is a link on that same landing page for the tools for the meeting. One of the extra links for this session is a link to that path to progress self-paced learning module. So you can share that 20-30-minute module with other folks that you might be interested in hearing this content to get that same content, or maybe you all watch it together and go through that together and have that conversation as you look at that analogy over time. I know it's been really helpful for me to think about kind of those components in that way, a nice way to shift the conversation. So that might be helpful for you all as well. And I have a quick
question. I'm sorry. So I thought that I had signed up for all these sessions. I had a hard time getting on. I made a folder and everything. So I'm not finding even the 1 o'clock and all the emails that I got back. So does it matter which one we go to as long as we just pick one? I mean, is that going to mess anything up for you guys or any? Okay.
No, all right. Go to any sessions. If you haven't registered or you have registered,
I thought I did.
You want to try a different session that you registered for, totally fine. Go ahead, Go to any sessions anytime throughout the rest of the event.
Okay, I just didn't want to mess anything up with getting the certificate and anything like that. If it changed what we went to. Okay.
No
All right,
worries.
thank you. Thanks.
Yeah. Feel free to change on the fly. Feel free if you're not able to go to a session you registered for that you really want to attend, that's totally fine too. We understand people's schedules. This is a busy time, so don't worry about that at all. Any other logistic questions about the event that people want to clarify before we take a break? All right, well, we hope this got you energized for the next couple of days. We will see you back at the top of the hour, wherever you are. So at 1 o'clock here on the East Coast, 12 o'clock Central Time, 11 o'clock Mountain Time, and 10 o'clock Pacific Time. And gosh, anyone who was on the Pacific Time, thank you for getting up early and joining us. We know there's no good time for any of these events, so we tried our best to find a time that might work for most people, but we know, time of year and time of time zones, it's never a perfect science. So we appreciate everyone getting up with us early in the morning, joining us later in your days. Thank you all for taking the time across these next couple of days. And again, don't hesitate to reach out if you need anything, progresscenter@air.org, or reach out directly to Mia. Mia, do you want to drop your email in the chat one more time for anyone if you have any technical challenges, issues, questions about accessing different sessions, materials, anything like that? Definitely go ahead and share those questions with us as well, and we'll do our best to get you a response. So thank you all again for your time. Take a break, walk around a little bit, and we'll see you back in your next session.
Thanks, everyone. And if you're in the IEP session, please try to grab a draft IEP, or not a draft, but a copy that you could write on during an activity.